Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. There really isn't a ton of stuff to really talk about when it comes to the transfer portal going forward. With that said, there was one noteworthy name that was in the portal that I think a lot of people have been curious and waiting on over the last couple weeks. That is great Osobor. He is a 6'8" center who played at Utah State last year, was the Mountain West Player of the Year, and about 4 or 5 weeks ago came out with a final list of 4 schools that he was going to choose from. Was down to Kentucky, Louisville, Texas Tech, or Washington. Well, since then, Kentucky kind of filled out its front court. They took Brandon Garrison as well as Amari Williams. So he was kind of off the table. He was off the table at Kentucky. They were not going to take him. And it really felt like over the last couple weeks, it was going to come down to a Louisville versus Washington thing. Louisville, new coach with Pat Kelsey. Washington, remember, also has a new coach, Danny Sprinkle. Where was he previously? Oh, that's right. He was actually at Utah State where he coached Great Osobor. So was Great Osobor going to go to the kind of pseudo blue blood in Louisville, ACC, or was he going to follow his new head coach to Washington? Well, I bring it up because on Monday morning, we got the answer as Great Osobor, the reigning Mountain West Player of the Year, committed to the University of Washington, giving Washington itself a marquee commitment here in this transfer portal cycle. And Danny Sprinkle, their new head coach, young guy, really kind of a bright, kind of rising star in the industry, a star recruit. With that said, though, I'll be honest. I'm just going to keep it real. We keep it 100 on this show, whether people like it or not. And bluntly, if Great Osobor had only committed to Washington, I don't know that we would honestly be leading the show with him. But we are leading the show for a very simple reason. It is because in the midst of his commitment, it came out about 9 a.m. Eastern, so 6 a.m. Pacific, Seattle time. A lot of Washington fans woke up to it. The news came with a little bit of caveat. It wasn't just that Great Osobor committed to Washington. It is that Great Osobor committed to Washington, and according to ESPN's Jonathan Givony, he had a NIL deal, which is record-setting and believed to be the highest number ever paid to a college basketball transfer and maybe a college basketball player ever, with Great Osobor, Mountain West Player of the Year, 6'8" center, transferring to Washington for a reported price tag of right around $2 million per year, to which I say that is just absolutely insane. And I think it's absolutely worth a conversation about. The exact quote, by the way, from Jonathan Givony, ESPN, Osobor will be the highest paid known player in college basketball with $2 million of NIL already in place. And so let's get into it. Let's talk about it. And let me start by saying this, okay? Why this is interesting to me is for a couple different reasons. Mainly, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is the player going to be worth what he is paid by the school? And that's something that we're going to find out over the course of, again, the next couple weeks, months, years. But what I will say is that I find this fascinating because what I think it really does is it does put a spotlight on just the modern world of college athletics. And I think kind of more importantly, roster building in 2024, 2025 in the NIL era. It's not just about finding pieces. It's not just about finding players that fit. But in a world where every school, even Arkansas, even Texas, even whoever you think is spending the most in NIL money, everybody's got some sort of budget. And I just don't know if anybody is worth $2 million a year in this NIL era. So let's go ahead and get into it. And let me start by saying this, because I know what a lot of people are going to say. A lot of people are going to say, Torres, it's not your money. It's not your school. You're not paying the bills. Why do you care? To which I say, actually, I agree with you 100%. And in general, in both life and in sports, I really don't care how anybody spends their money, okay? First off, in life, I don't care how you spend your money. Listen, I pay my bills. I pay my taxes. Just got off the phone with my tax guy today. I spend my disposable income differently than you. There are, 23-year-old kids right out of school that are buying $100,000 sports cars and paying $1,200 a month in car payments. I think that's absurd. But if that's how you want to spend your money, that's fine. I'd prefer to go on a vacation. I'd prefer to do this. I'd prefer to invest, whatever. Your money, you do what you want. And frankly, it's the same in college athletics. You want to pay your football coach, you want to give him an extension after a 7-5 year where you go to a lousy bowl game. It's not my money. You do what you want. And the opposite is true as well. You want to pay a coach $20 million in a buyout? That's fine too. You spend your money how you want. Why this is interesting, though, to me is, again, because it speaks to where we are in the roster building process in college basketball. And bluntly, I'm just going to say something that will probably make me look bad and some people will probably criticize. I just don't think Great Osobor is worth $2 million per year. And again, I think it speaks to where we are. And I think it speaks to a problem that is going to creep up as we get deeper into this NIL collective era. It is that, again, is the juice worth the squeeze? And you better make sure when you're paying top dollar for these players that you get a return on your investment. Now, in terms of Great Osobor, listen, I think he is, very bad pun intended, I think he's a good college basketball player. Averaged 17 and 9 in the Mountain West last year. For people who have not seen him play or who are not familiar with his game, I keep quoting the Shaq meme. Sorry, I was not familiar with the game. Great Osobor, really good college basketball player, okay? Like I said, he averaged 17 and 9 last year. He was the Mountain West Player of the Year. What's also worth noting, he's a 6'8" center, okay? He's a 6'8" center, doesn't really defend the rim, averaged about a block and a half per game despite playing 34, 35 minutes per game. And he doesn't shoot the three ball at all. 21% from three. And so when I look at Great Osobor, I'll be honest, go ahead and look at all of my transfer portal rankings from throughout the offseason. There was never a moment at any point where I said that I believe that he was one of the best players in the transfer portal. As a matter of fact, I kind of said the opposite. Listen, by the way, I'm not here to criticize other transfer portal rankings, but I saw people in this industry saying, oh, he's one of the top 3, top 5, top 7 player. No, he's not. What I saw, honestly, was a player who, in my opinion, I think kind of found his level at the Mountain West. What do I mean by that? Remember, we had Will Wade on this show a few weeks ago, and we were talking to Will Wade about recruiting. And what he said is, look, the great thing about this portal era is everybody kind of finds the level they're supposed to be at, right? Some guys, a Reed Shepherd, a Rob Dillingham, a Steph Castle, they're clearly high major guys. They go there, they ball out, they leave. Then you have some players that go to the high major level, just aren't good enough. They transfer down for a year or two. Then you have players that are maybe, recruited to a lower level than they should be, and they transfer up. And so everybody finds their level, but I kind of think Great Osobor kind of found his level in the Mountain West. He's a 6'8" center. He doesn't have elite size. He doesn't have elite frame. He doesn't have elite athleticism. He just plays really hard, and he's really strong, and he's really physical. I don't want to sit here and say he's like sort of an Oscar Tshiebwe, but he's kind of sort of an Oscar Tshiebwe. Big, physical, tough, strong, not particularly skilled. By the way, Oscar Tshiebwe was a National Player of the Year. But you saw when he played in the SEC, there were a lot of nights that he was dominant, but there were a lot of nights where he was just kind of okay. And eventually, especially in his second year, it felt like teams kind of figured him out. And it felt like there were certain teams that gave him specific trouble. And so when I look at Great Osobor, by the way, I am not going to apologize for criticizing the player. This is the NIL era. Kids are getting paid, okay? If I can criticize an NBA team or an NFL team when they give out a bad contract, I'm going to do the same at the college level. And when I look at this kid, I think he's a very good college basketball player. But he's a 6'8" center going into the Big Ten, where guess what? He's going to have to go against Umar Ballo at Indiana. He's going to have to go against Purdue, where, yes, they're losing Zach Edey. They have 2 7'1", 2, 3 guys on their roster right now. Will Berg, Zach Edey's backup, is 7'2", and he's going to play next year. Michigan State has Xavier Booker, 7-footer. You go on and on and on down the list. These are the guys this kid is going to have to play against. And so I'm done criticizing the kid. That is my honest opinion. But what I also think it speaks to, and this is the fascinating part, this is the interesting part, this is what I always try to do on this show, is take you behind the scenes of what it's really like in college athletics, okay? And right now, I think college athletics is at a really interesting inflection point with this NIL stuff because everybody's spending money. But eventually, guess what happens? Boosters want to see a return on their investment. And so, what becomes interesting to me, and this is where it gets so fascinating, pay Great Osobor what you want. It's not my money. If you believe Great Osobor is worth $2 million, that's fine. If Great Osobor commands $2 million, take that money, Great Osobor. I'm not here to criticize you. What I am here to say is that I do question, is Washington going to get the return on the investment that they expect? And are those boosters in the end going to be happy with what they get? Because at the end of the day, listen, I know what I just said. It's somebody else's money. It's this, it's that, it's whatever. By the way, Washington, people probably don't realize, it does have great NIL. I heard even a year ago when Mike Hopkins was really struggling, hey, Torres, I don't know how good they're going to be, but that NIL is not an issue at that school. And I just bring it up because while Washington does have great NIL, no NIL is unlimited, and somebody does write those checks and cut those checks, and the money does come out of somebody's checking account, okay? And so when I look at it, I just look at a guy that when you are paying this kid this much, when you are paying him like he is the best player in college basketball, I think those boosters are going to expect to see something resembling the best player in college basketball next year. I don't think he's that. And I feel like all I'm doing is crushing the kid, but I'm telling you how it's really going to be. And all of a sudden, those boosters are going to look up in January, February next year like, oh, we paid for this? This is the highest paid player in college basketball. Like, imagine in the NFL, if owners didn't really know who the players were that they were signing in free agency, and a team, a GM kind of needed a quarterback and came to their owner and said, like, yeah, we believe this guy, we got to pay him, top dollar. And the owner doesn't really know who he is and whatever. And let's say it's a quarterback. And let's say it's like a Gardner Minshew or something. And you're paying him Patrick Mahomes money or Josh Allen money or Lamar Jackson money. And he ain't Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. Owner's going to sit there and say, well, what the heck just happened? And I think that's what's going to happen here. And so, again, this is what's so interesting. You can pay whatever you want, but there are consequences. And I am curious if boosters will be more hesitant to pay next year going forward if they don't get the return on their investment. And that's where it's interesting. And that's where it's fascinating, is the kind of push-pull of building a college basketball program in 2024, 2025. Listen, we all think Arkansas is the best NIL money in America. But John Calipari has had to say no to some kids because the demands are that high. The demands are too much. He just says we can't do it. Again, Kentucky largely backed off this kid because the demands were just too high. They said we can't spend our entire budget on this kid when we could get 3 or 4 good players beside him. Producer Matt brought that up. It's like, this kid's this good, you get 3 players for that price. But I guess Washington feels like we're going into the Big Ten. We got to make moves. And this is just where college sports is today. And so I'm curious if this is kind of an inflection point. If this is a moment where if this works out, then yeah, Washington's going to push all their chips in the middle and say, screw it, let's do it again next year. But if they don't, will they reel it back? And I think that's what we're going to start to see in this NIL era going forward. I think you're already starting to see it. It's interesting. I talk to coaches all the time. I remember talking to a coach in the middle of this season, and he was saying, like, he's kind of at a not quite a high major school in college basketball, but kind of one of those like mid-major plus schools, like a Mountain West A10 type school. And he said to me, he said, like, Torres, dude, yeah, we raised X amount of money. Let's say it's $1 million. But we didn't spend all of it because we know that if it doesn't go well this year, it's going to be harder to raise money next year. You see it in football already. I think we've seen it in basketball already. Part of the reason I think John Calipari's at Arkansas is because, bluntly, I think he wasn't going to get the money from the boosters that he needed to compete at the highest level, where he gets a fresh slate at Arkansas that he wouldn't have at Kentucky. By the way, in football, I mentioned this to producer Matt before the show. I remember in January or February, we were talking about an article I saw where apparently Florida football is having trouble raising money in NIL for Billy Napier. And I told producer Matt, I said, Florida is never going to have trouble raising NIL money. They're having trouble raising NIL money for Billy Napier. They don't want to pay because he's been telling them, I need this, 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 and this, and the results haven't equated on the field. So I hope this doesn't sound like I'm just criticizing the kid, because I'm really not. And I really don't care how people spend their money. What I do find very interesting, though, is how is all of this money allocated in the NIL portal area? You push all your chips in the middle for a kid like this. It comes out that he is the highest paid player in college basketball. Again, he better play like an All-American. And bluntly, I just don't know how many kids are really worth that kind of money if $2 million is the high end. Like last year, Zach Edey would have been worth it. Dalton Connect would have been worth it. Rob Dillingham would have been worth it. Donovan Clingan from UConn would have been worth it. But the list isn't that long. And I just find this whole situation very fascinating.